let me tell you the story of one of the most important and influential moments in superhero fiction. Before the big screen interconnected cinematic universe craze, before Kevin Feige and Marvel built their cinematic empire in 2008, even before the likes of Justice League the Animated Series, there was World's Finest, a 3-part crossover between Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series, which brought together two of the most iconic iterations of DC's flagship heroes for the very first time. Kind of. World's Finest works incredibly as a gateway into DC's mythos. The DC animated shows were gigantic hits and critical darlings. For so many people, myself included, they were the formative portraits of these characters and of superheroes at large. World's Finest specifically was even an event of its own, to the point where you could buy the 3-parter in isolation on home media. Whether you became a comic book fanatic after, or you never picked up a single issue, if you came up in the 90s or aughts, you've almost certainly seen an episode at one point. But let's say you haven't. Let's say World's Finest is the first superhero anything that you ever encounter. That's okay. You don't need to be intimately acquainted with either Batman or Superman. Even as a crossover episode within Superman the Animated Series, World's Finest makes it inessential to have prior knowledge. This arc is the introduction, the primer on DC's two biggest icons. It succinctly lays out Superman's personality, worldview, and his nemesis in Lex, but also Batman's cynicism, methods, and his nemesis in Joker. It leaves itself very open to people who never saw a frame of Batman before watching it, but also rewards viewers who've been there all along by giving them a superhero team-up of a lifetime. By the end, the audience has a firm understanding of each hero and villain dynamic, making it easy to jump into their respective shows or comic runs. And that also highlights the benefit of contrast. By seeing Bats and Supes together, we better understand them individually. That said, this crossover is equally as rewarding for longtime viewers who had gotten to know this version of Clark Kent over the more than 24 solo adventures in the series prior to Batman's arrival in Metropolis. Likewise, fans of Batman the Animated Series get to relish in the opportunity to finally see this Batman interacting with a wider DC universe that had only ever existed implicitly in the original run of the show. And although watching an episode of Batman next to an episode of Superman can be jarring, given the far darker tone of Batman, there is still a structural lifeblood between the two shows that allows one to be incorporated into the other for an event like this, in a way that makes it feel like they were at home with one another all along. More than just a crossover event, World's Finest is a story of contrasts, heroes and villains alike, and what those contrasts reveal about character, partnership, and the very foundations of the DC universe. World's Finest aired in its 3-part entirety on October 4th, 1997. That feels like a lifetime ago. God, I feel old. It represented the first real attempt at a shared universe working on screen, blending Superman the Animated Series and Batman the Animated Series, now airing under the name The New Batman Adventures, following a change in network and functioned more like a feature-length crossover than an episode of television. Hence, why they kind of sold this as a film. It's actually called the Batman-Superman movie. It uses contrast as a defining tool of its story arc, exploring how opposites can sharpen identities. Light versus shadow, hope versus cynicism.
Day versus night. Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham.
World's Finest uses these contrasts not only to drive the narrative, but also to clearly establish who Bruce and Clark are at their core. On the surface, Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent are two diametrically opposed figures. Superman is the hopeful idealist, direct, transparent, altruistic, rooted in a belief that people are fundamentally good. Batman is the cynical pragmatist, secretive, relentless, shaped by a conviction that fear and deterrence are the only ways to keep people safe. What I find most fascinating about this pairing is how the contrast between Superman and Batman is characterized, but also their commonalities. We see this through their mindsets, the types of villains, challenges they face, and their approach to different perspectives. Their first encounter perfectly illustrates this divide. Batman harshly interrogates a mobster for information regarding the Joker's whereabouts in Metropolis, something Superman would never condone, especially going about it like this. When Superman intervenes, Batman aggressively responds. Now, Superman being Superman, with Superman's powers, he could incapacitate Bruce in a snap to stop him, probably kill him as well, but he doesn't, of course. He doesn't use violence to deter Batman or retaliate. Instead, he's kinda shocked, struck by the conviction behind Bruce's actions, and sees the altruism behind his aggressive methods. Bruce Wayne was a billionaire orphan, a holder of immense wealth dulled by the grief of profound loss. His worldview is shaped by trauma and a distrust in institutions, driving him to weaponize fear. Clark Kent, on the other hand, is a working-class immigrant, raised in a loving, humble home. Though alien in origin, his environment grounded him with empathy and decency, shaping his hopeful idealism. Superman is emotionally available, whereas Bruce Wayne is emotionally unavailable, cursed by his crusade as Batman because he can't afford to let anyone in on his secret. But together, they balance one another. Bruce reminds Clark of humanity's dark corners, shaping his vigilance. Clark reminds Bruce of the humanity worth saving, softening his cynicism. World's Finest provides a subversion of expectations. What begins as a clash of ideals evolves into a test of compatibility. As they stalk and observe one another, it seems like the story is heading towards a big confrontation between heroes, taking advantage of the information they each glean in the ensuing fights. But instead, as they investigate one another, they find common ground. Batman bugs Superman's apartment, observing Clark's domestic life, discovering his secret identity, and, along with it, his humanity and attachments. And we get this really great reaction out of Batman too. It's pretty fun. Superman may be an alien from another world, but he is just as human as the rest of us and is good down to his core. Batman recognizes the value in that. Superman observes Batman's relentlessness, his refusal to quit, and realizes the tragedy that fuels his mission. Their observations aren't about exploiting weaknesses, but about understanding the strength in their differences, testing how opposites might work together. So instead of a contest of champions, if you will, World's Finest plays their encounters as steps toward mutual respect, a blueprint for a partnership built on balance. Together, they're able to unite to save Metropolis from the chaos of a divided and bitter Lex and Joker, and forge a true partnership that lays the seeds for the Justice League later on. The only aspect of the story that puts Superman and Batman in direct conflict with one another for a significant period of time is the romance subplot, in which Bruce strikes up an unexpected relationship with Lois Lane upon his arrival to Metropolis. But even this little love triangle serves to drive home the ways in which both heroes are each other's mirror image. The irony of Lois's attraction to Bruce is that, unbeknownst to her, it's an inversion of her usual dynamic with Superman. She loves Bruce, but fiercely dislikes his alter ego, whom she views as a brute. Whereas with Superman, she loves the alter ego while paying little mind to Clark, who she sees as a friend and co-worker. Which is especially interesting when you remember that Batman, particularly this Batman, is Bruce's true identity. Bruce is the disguise, the front he puts on to face the public. Batman is the outward manifestation of the man inside, and Lois finds him deeply off-putting. Instead, she's drawn to the facade, the charming confidence he performs, which is exactly the opposite of her connection with Superman. Like Batman, Superman is Clark's true identity, a direct reflection of who he is at his core, while Clark is a front. While the disconnect between Clark and Superman isn't as clear-cut as it is between Bruce and Batman, Clark is very much a persona designed to help Superman blend in and live a normal life when he is out saving the world, and Lois couldn't be less interested in him. Not because she finds him repulsive, but because he's a watered-down version of who Clark really is. Superman, with all of his best traits slightly dimmed as to not draw attention, whereas Superman, the real Superman identity, that guy's the authentic Clark, shining as bright as can be, and Lois finds him irresistible. So not only does Lois's fling with Bruce ultimately serve to affirm how genuine her affection for Superman truly is, but it also lays bare the fact that Superman and Batman are actually more alike than they might initially think. Two men whose true mask is the face they put on whenever they're out of their costumes. The only difference is Batman has to up the charm whenever he's playing Bruce Wayne, while Superman has to dull his charm a bit when he's going by Clark Kent. It's a perfect microcosm of their dichotomy. Two men who are on opposite ends of the same spectrum and most ultimately meet in the middle to pursue their common goal. I also really love how the writers used this arc as a way to advance Superman and Lois's relationship. Pairing Lois with Bruce isn't just a fun source of drama, it marks the moment Clark learns to act on his feelings for Lois, which eventually culminates in the two getting together at the end of the series. Clark never took advantage of Lois's infatuation with Superman, but Bruce was the ultimate test for Lois, and it shows that deep down, she loves the good-natured, righteous Superman and has been neglecting her feelings for him the whole time. The contrasting characters around Lois in World's Finest allows her and Clark to reconcile their respective hearts, although it takes a bit longer. Lex and Joker mirror Batman and Superman's partnership, at least until theirs collapses. Both are raging narcissists, but embody different extremes. Joker, as emissary of chaos, impulsive, anarchic, thrives on lunacy, and Lex, as emissary of control, calculated, elitist, obsessed with order and image. At first, this pairing seems dangerous. Joker's unpredictability makes him the perfect assassin for Lex's Superman-killing plan. Batman and Superman were also a bit trepidatious in trusting one another at the start, and then, through their time together, formed a genuine respect and understanding. The inverse is true of Joker and Lex. I mean, it's like the two biggest villains recognize that they're both A-list villains and then try to work together, team up, take down the heroes, but that eventually devolves into the infighting. Their respect is based on status, not on an understanding of who the other is, which is the opposite of the respect Superman and Batman have. They don't immediately respect each other because of status. They each have to understand the other first before affirming that partnership. Lex and Joker never properly take that step. Joker and Lex innovate to make things more difficult for Batman and Superman, causing the two to reevaluate their approach, working together instead of independently. I also think Lex's willingness to work with the Joker speaks to his deep-seated hatred of Superman, which can be his Achilles heel. It causes him to be more reckless than he appears, resulting in him collaborating with a known maniac. Likewise, I think Joker is more thoughtful in his approach than he lets on, but if anyone thinks he's unhinged and crazy, he's able to manipulate them more easily. Both Joker and Lex hold their cards close to the chest, and that ultimately is their undoing. So, the partnership unravels. Naturally, Joker resents being a pawn. He's the clown prince of crime, not anyone's hired gun. Lex sees Joker's sadistic joy as sloppy and incompatible with his meticulous strategies. And instead of valuing one another's strengths, they sabotage each other. Ego becomes their undoing. Joker's demeanor, jovial, cavalier, hides a sadistic cunning. He uses his lunacy as a weapon, manipulates Lex, and cripples Superman with kryptonite just to achieve his own ends. Joker is utterly incapable of being a true team player. No one can share the throne with him. Everyone is either subservient to him or an enemy. Ultimately, where Batman and Superman learn to respect and use their differences to succeed, Lex and Joker fail precisely because they cannot overcome their own hubris and both need to be in charge and in control. Batman and Superman are obviously the heroes of the story. They could not have been more victorious without one another. But Lex and Joker weaken their scheme considerably by operating in such a contentious and fractured way. Similar to the way Superman and Batman's relationship with Lois ultimately demonstrates why the two heroes are compatible despite their many differences, I think the reason Lex and Joker's partnership was doomed from the beginning is best exemplified by their respective relationships with their female sidekicks. Although Mercy Graves and Harley Quinn only play minor roles in the story and don't really interact much outside of their brief confrontation, the way they're treated by their bosses serves as a testament to Lex and Joker's incompatibility as collaborators. Ever the CEO type, Lex values order and hierarchy above all else. There's a strict chain of command of which he is at the very top, and so as long as you adhere to it and serve his interests, he'll reward you. Hence, his relationship with Mercy is extremely amicable. Stoic and ruthlessly efficient, Mercy is the consummate employee. Totally loyal, she never denies Lex or questions the imbalance of power between them, and that's exactly what Lex craves in a collaborator above all else. Complete subservience. He doesn't want a partner, he wants a soldier. And this is ultimately what poisoned his partnership with the Joker. He went into their collaboration expecting obedience from a man who reflexively and aggressively resists hierarchies of control. Joker's mere existence is a mockery of the worldview Lex exposes, the living embodiment of chaos. Lex seeks out Joker's help because he recognizes the strategic value in employing a wild card, but he doesn't fully comprehend that this is exactly the quality that makes Joker a terrible collaborator. His repeated attempts to treat the Clown Prince of Crime as a subordinate are anathema to Joker, and he lashes out in retaliation, upending their scheme before it even has a chance to bear fruit. An outcome that feels somewhat inevitable when considering Joker's contentious relationship with Harley. Like Lex, Joker also demands subservience from others. Although not a CEO, he traces his roots to the world of organized crime, a cutthroat world ruled by the dominant. And even if that weren't the case, as an attention-seeking narcissist, Joker is unwilling to share the spotlight. It's Joker's stage and everyone else are day players. But unlike Lex, who is willing to incentivize a degree of loyalty, for Joker, it's just another perverse source of comedy. Joker may expect underlings to submit to his will, but he doesn't respect them for it. If anything, he finds it pathetic. He can't for the life of him understand why someone would choose to live that way, because he certainly wouldn't. Case in point, Harley Quinn. Here's someone who has given herself entirely to Joker, and he finds it hysterical. To Joker, Harley's devotion is pitiful. She's useful to him, but unworthy of respect, and yet, of course, if she were to ever step out of line or stand up for herself, he'd be quick to punish her. Because at the end of the day, there's no good way to work with the Joker because his expectations are contradictory. He respects assertiveness, but sees any attempt to be assertive as a challenge. It's why the only consistent relationship in his life is with Batman, whose rivalry perfectly circles the square. But for Harley and Lex, a long-term partnership was never going to work because there's simply no form of collaboration he finds acceptable. It's a wonder either of these freaks thought they could make it work with each other when they can't even maintain a stable relationship with their respective partners. Up until World's Finest, the DC animated universe was a binary. It was Gotham or Metropolis. In fact, the DCAU as we know it didn't even exist. Both Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series were separate, unconnected entities that just so happened to share a creative team. So it was ambitious enough attempting to merge these two realities into a single one, especially given how much they differed in style and tone. Even aesthetically, both shows feel incongruous, sharing that familiar Bruce Timm art style, but embracing completely opposing design sensibilities. The Gotham City of Batman the Animated Series takes its cues from Tim Burton's Batman films, a vast sea of Gothic Art Deco architecture forever obscured by the black of night. Every frame is composed on black cells as if to suggest that the city is eternally engulfed in darkness. Conversely, the Metropolis of Superman the Animated Series is the shining city on the hill, a retro-futurist Tomorrowland comprised of sleek, mid-century modern designs and blessed with seemingly perpetual blue skies. On paper, these worlds couldn't feel more distinct, and so you'd think the intuitive way to combine them would be to downplay the contrast, filling in the margins to make these two places feel congruent with one another. But that isn't what happens in World's Finest. Rather than minimizing the contrast, the creative team behind the episode emphasizes them. Though it may seem counterintuitive, it's through this contrast that we see how both coexist, and what they mean when set against one another. Gotham, a hopeless, depraved, violent den of criminality steeped in fear and corruption. Metropolis, on the other hand, is futuristic, bright, and opportunity-rich, driven by capital and innovation. The magic of World's Finest is showing that neither city defines the entire world. Metropolis gives Gotham hope, proof that optimism and progress can exist. Gotham grounds Metropolis, reminding it not to lose sight of reality and the darker truths of human nature. This creates a more expansive DC universe, one that reflects the complexity of our own world, full of privilege, misfortune, light, and darkness. World's Finest lays the foundation for the DC universe with this. By understanding the environments and experiences that shape others, we grow more empathetic. That's what Batman and Superman model for us. Heroes who embrace differences, reflect the full spectrum of the human condition, and embody the need for empathy across divides. World's Finest proves that contrast-driven storytelling is more compelling than just setting up a battle between characters. And look, I love me Batman v Superman, I do. I like that movie. But this is more interesting, is what I'm saying.
It doesn't make you grown up. It makes you a loser.
Its biggest strength is in allowing Batman and Superman to unite through their differences rather than arbitrarily pitting them against one another. It means neither one of them get undermined or upstaged by the other, and instead allows these two heroes, both protagonists of their own shows, to forge an ironclad bond and lift one another up. It shows that you can take seemingly diametrically opposed portrayals of characters, elements from movies that seem totally incompatible, and combine them into a new and compelling mixture when they meet. It's also the ideal model for when Batman and Superman inevitably team up in James Gunn's DCU. By all accounts, the DCU is going to have its own Batman who will be introduced in an upcoming film. And whether or not that's Robert Pattinson or not, remains to be seen. I am becoming a little less certain of that, although it would be cool. And you know what? That's okay. It doesn't need to be Corn, Sweat, and Pattinson specifically, although it should, but World's Finest showed that it could be possible to put these two performances on screen together in a way that would work and make sense and become something so much stronger in unison. Pattinson's Batman and the Gotham he lives in exudes much of the grittiness of Batman the Animated Series, while also getting to thoroughly examine the darkness within Bruce Wayne himself. It's a dark neo-noir with an internalized and fraught character study at its core, but Bruce comes out at the end no longer vengeance, instead seeing the benefit of helping Gotham and being seen as a savior rather than a hammer for justice. Gunn's Superman, on the other hand, is an optimistic and often lighthearted take on a world of superheroes and metahumans where Corn Sweat's Clark Kent unceasingly tries to reach out to the best parts of everyone he encounters. Even upon finding out that his birth parents were more devious and condescending than he believed, he still is able to reassert his own compassion and benevolence and kindness through the love and imparted lessons of his adopted parents. Clark digging deeper into the emergent light inside Bruce, chipping away at the darkness he uses as armor, could even be the central conflict between the two, which is then resolved so that they can unite and take on whatever threat comes their way. Regardless, any iteration of these two teaming up together must follow World Finest's principle. Establish the contrast, lean into the ensuing partnership, and then let the differences define synergy rather than merely creating a rift. Contrast equals character clarity, which equals stronger universe building. Whether it's James Gunn playing in the DC sandbox, Kevin Feige with Marvel, or hell, any creator merging separate properties into a crossover, world building, storytelling, and character ensembles could all learn something from World's Finest. World's Finest was more than a fun crossover. It was the first working shared universe story and a perfect primer on DC's two biggest icons. Its genius lies in showing Batman and Superman and their rogues in sharp relief, then letting us imagine how they expand beyond the story. It's a phenomenal three-parter that stands as one of the best entries in the entire DC animated universe, right up there with the likes of Mask of the Phantasm, Heart of Ice, the Clayface stuff, you name it, as the most readily iconic and enduring tales DC animation has ever had to offer. But that might be a layup when you put Batman and Superman on screen together. World's Finest holds up. It's not just about teaming up. It's about showing two heroes as different as nights and day can still be the world's finest together.